on the World Wide Web, on your mobile phone, and on all social media platforms. Jambo Radio.
It's over 200 years since the abolition of the slave trade, yet Black people around the world are still subjected to all kinds of discrimination. 2020 will go down in history, not just for COVID-19 pandemic, but the killing of yet another Black man, George Floyd, on the street of the United States of America, reunited the Black Lives Matter movement. Protests across the world brought many debates on the systematic racism faced by Black people at all levels. In the UK, as in Scotland, every October is Black History Month, a time set aside each year to celebrate the contributions Black people have made in our society. But how can we change the consequences of racism when it is rooted in systems and slavery? To discuss this topic, I'm joined by a panel of distinguished guests based all across Scotland. First up, we've got Nadia Kayenge. Nadia is a Green Party candidate for the Scottish Parliament in next year's election. Also a columnist with Glasgow Times. Nadia, how are you this afternoon?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. I'm glad you're here, and it's fantastic. So how are you preparing for your candidature and elections?
Yeah, we're working on it. Due to COVID-19, a lot has changed, but there are some behind the scene working in progress. So we're trying to do our best so that we can get ready for the campaign.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nadia, for coming on this very important discussion for Black History Month. We also have on our panel, Abiodun Abdul, founder and blogger, Scottish Racism Project. Abi, how are you?
I'm really good, George. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I look forward to this. And next up, we have the one and only Councillor Graham Campbell, first African and Caribbean Councillor for Glasgow City Council, who recently drafted an anti-racism motion that was passed at Glasgow City Council full meeting. Councillor Graham Campbell, thank you for coming on.
Hello, George, and thank you for inviting me to this conversation. And I should say that I'm actually, as of today, have launched my campaign for Edinburgh Western to be selected as the parliamentary candidate there. So I've been rather busy with trying to sort stuff about that this morning. But no doubt this conversation will go on to a lot of how our people are perceived and what role in society they can play with the history that we are going to talk about today. It'll be very
Campbell, thank you so much for having you. The wealth of knowledge and information and education, I look forward to that. And congratulations on starting your campaign as well. Next, we have Amanda Baker.
Hi.
Amanda, thank you so much for coming on. Amanda is an author, poet, performance, spoken word performer, and she blogs at Brown Girl Outside the Ring. That's a blog. You can check that out. I've read quite a few of it. Very, very thought-provoking. And she's also the first Black woman to have been elected to Newcastle City Council. Amanda, how are you today?
I'm very well, George. Thank you. And it's absolutely lovely to be here. It's nice to talk to you again. But it's actually lovely to be talking to all these other people who I've never met before. And apart from the circumstances of the debate, obviously, because of how things are, none of us are really getting to meet new people much at the minute. So it's lovely.
We are here virtually. So, but thank you so much for coming on, okay. Amanda. And we also have with us on the panel, Mokami Macron, MBA, former policy manager in the Equality Unit at the Scottish, and human rights campaigner with special focus on race and gender. Mokami Macron, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, George. Thank you for inviting me. It's good to see all the people here. I know names, but I've never met, apart from Graham. So, yeah, I'm good.
Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we have Professor Emeritus Sir Jeff Palmer. Hopefully, is going to join us. I think we've just lost him there. But we're going to crack on, and hopefully Professor Sir Jeff Palmer will join us a little later on. I really appreciate your time, ladies and gentlemen, for coming on this very important discussion. I think we should go straight to the subject, which is how can we change the consequences of racism when it is rooted in system and slavery? I'll start with you, Amanda.
Oh, okay. I got the short straw. Right. I think one of the problems, George, and you mentioned there about me being elected to Newcastle City Council. I should point out, because the others don't know me, we are talking about 1988. Okay, that's when I was elected. So in some ways, that feels like ancient history. You're talking about slavery, ancient history. And one of the things that is definitely problematic, which I see firsthand, is that the similar conversations we are having now were being had when I was elected in 1988, and they weren't new then. And I noticed a couple of things just looking around the web yesterday. Huffington Post had an advertisement on for a video series which was entitled Empowering Videos About Race. There was also something a couple of days in The Guardian, I read online, and at the bottom it said, and I kid you not, people are starting to talk about race. And you just, where do you even begin with that? And I think really just kicking off this discussion, my concern would be, there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of discussion. When are people going to start listening? Because what you mentioned at the beginning, the horrific results and scenes happening in America, that is the outcome of what happens when people don't listen, have not been listening, and things have not been changing. And people like me, Granny, getting very weary of having actually the same conversations decade after decade after decade.
No, I think that's a very good start there. I'll come to you, Abby. But you are the project. You are the founder, and you blog on your blog on a project, Scottish Racism Project. What do you say to how can we change the consequences of racism when it is rooted in systems and slavery? What's your response to that?
I actually echo Amanda in that, unfortunately, it does seem to be generational, and things are not really moving along to the extent that we would expect, considering the decades that have gone by. However, time and time again, I find the solution to any type of ignorance is education, and having more racism education, or should I say anti-racism education, included in the curriculum, both explicitly and implicitly. So not just talking about, for example, let's say Glasgow. Very, very few people in Glasgow of any ethnicity knows about the 1919 race riots that happened in the country, or should I say happened in the city. It's history that's been swept under the carpet, even though it was only 3 generations ago. It's still relatively quite recent. Why don't people know about it? Because it's been buried. And because of that, history repeats itself. And there's still racial tensions as a result of people not knowing about that event to learn from it. So we need to know about all incidents of racism as and when it happens, so we can deal with all incidents of racism as and when it happens, and therefore hopefully not repeat similar incidents of racism. Education is the key.
Education is the key. I think just hold the thought there. I think we'll welcome on our panel Professor Emeritus Jeff Palmer. Prof, can you hear me? Okay, it might still be a challenge to get Prof on, but I'll continue with maybe this time, Mokami Makrum. You're a former policy manager, retired now in the equality unit of the Scottish government, and also human rights campaigner. And your campaign is basically specifically on race and gender and class. What's your take on the subject?
Thank you, George. My starting point these days is with an apology to especially young people. When I saw how distressed young people, including my granddaughter, were about the killing of George Floyd, I was really sad because I realized that I think we were lied to, and we bought into the lie as well. In the 80s and 90s, we truly believed that the government, the world, the policymakers were listening. And especially when we marched in Edinburgh for the first time in the history of Edinburgh, there was a march against the killing of Ahmed Sheikh and the subsequent outcry, people who felt that this is new to them and they didn't know those kinds of things happen. We were encouraged, and we had a solidarity among different communities. We kind of believe that under the term black, all those people who are not white or who are discriminated against, we could change things. But looking at where we are now, and as Amanda said, when I read the same stuff as we were dealing with in the 70s and 90s, when I was new to all this, and we are building on what other people before us have been raising, I'm looking at it and wondering, we need to look at why did the policies that were put in place not work? The Commission for Racial Equality, which became ESRC, had all sorts of policies. We had Stephen Lawrence inquiry, produced many recommendations. We had race equality duties. We can't move forward without understanding why those which were institutional instruments did not work. The other thing is we also need to look at the communities that have experienced the same kind of racism, but somehow they have managed to work their way through the system and go someplace, a better place than we are at. And I think that the final thing for me at the moment is encouraging everybody to stop looking at a single story. My own story of racism and my journey of racism is unique to me, but it cannot be used to make policy. We are having a situation where now everybody, when we are campaigning before, there was no social media, so there was no GoFundMe and all those kind of things. So the communication tended to be slower. But now everybody is an expert on racism, which is not bad. I mean, it's good to have so many people campaigning. But we're not going to change anything if now we only deal with Mukami's experiences, irrespective of all of you around the table, because I have a voice, I have power, I can influence, I can speak to the powers that be. So we need to regroup again and look at what do we want collectively to change. And I can come back to this, to what I think we should be doing on that.
What do we want collectively to change? Thank you, Mokami Macron. We'll come back to that. Obviously, we'll develop more into that. I think it's possible that we can, before I come to you, Councillor Graham Campbell, can we welcome Professor Jeff Palmer? Thank you, Prof. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Hi, Prof. Can you hear us? Okay, I think we'll just move on. Councillor Graham Campbell, you have been what we would describe in Scotland and in Glasgow as the man that has fronted so many, in recent years, so many anti-racism campaigns in your previous role. What do you make of this subject?
This is a big subject, and as with all advice I've ever had, when eating an elephant, you eat one mouthful at a time. Well, where do you start? I suppose that the history does tell us, right, that Glasgow and cities like it have this massive connection to slavery and colonialism, which is the root of the racism that we have now. It doesn't come from nowhere. People have learned these behaviors and attitudes towards us, which are affecting us in the way we live our daily lives. If Black Lives Matter demonstrations in June told us anything, it told us this, that the younger generation of people that's grown up in Scotland, the country that likes to think that it's equal and it's all Jack Thompson's bands, all of that stuff, it's nonsense. We know that racism is rife right across the country in all its forms, whether it's passive aggression on buses, whether it's supermarket security officers following you around the shelves as if you're shoplifting, even in your 50s, it still happens to me. But it's from there to the violence, the verbal racism and abuse, and then to the discrimination in the economy and in the delivery of public services. It's parents in schools failing to get the authorities to take the correct actions against what are hate crimes and call the police, which is what should be happening. We have great equalities laws in Scotland. We have some of the best in the world, but they're only as good as the people's ability to A, understand them, and B, to use them. That is where Black people are disempowered. So we've had to organise, we've had to fight. And those demonstrations really showed us that the younger generation of people who've grown up here in Scotland have actually had a negative experience. That Scottish institutions are discriminating against them. That the society that we have, which likes to think itself tolerant and outgoing, which for the most part it is, but the minority of people out there that are hardcore racists have become more emboldened, particularly in the post-Brexit world, and indeed in the toxic online environment that we have on social media, that has allowed and facilitated. And of course, politicians like Boris Johnson, of course, play to that gallery. The political climate has been created to make it more acceptable in some quarters to act and be racist and be discriminatory. So we're fighting against that tide, and we need allies to do that. Of course we do, but we need to be strengthened in our own battle in this, because we're never not going to be in the battle against racism. That's just, I'm afraid, with a racist society that's been created the way it has, we are going to have that for our lifetimes. The question is what tools we have to use to survive that process and to succeed in the aims that we have to make the society different. Because I want to make sure that the generation that follows us does not have the experience that we've had. And they also want to make sure that they don't have that experience too. Enough is enough, and that's what those Black Lives Matter need to declare to us. So it requires those of us who are in the institutions to do something about the institutions that we're part of. Particularly, I'm in the public sector, therefore I can hold my own organisation to account and say, look, this has got to change. How we recruit changes, how we train people changes. The career progression of Black people who join us has to change. All of those things can be done and now must be done. There's a lot of experience around this round table here to the barriers we've all come up against to try and change those things. But we just have to be much more relentless. Now we have a slight advantage in that the Black community is far more politically numerous. We're now far more of weight and social political clout in a way perhaps we weren't 10 years ago. We now must use that political clout.
Mm. Enough is enough. I think that's what I got out of there. We come now to you, Nadia. Nadia Kayenge, you are, obviously going for the public office. Just a good follow-up from Graham there, who is also a politician. And then you also, a columnist on a newspaper. I think you're probably the first female black female columnist on the newspaper. What's your take on this subject? How can we change the consequences of racism when it is rooted in systems and slavery? Is that the beginning for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a little bit strange for me to really know exactly what to begin and explaining this. First of all, I need to say that I have less than 20 years in this country. I'm originally from Africa. So someone said, well, it's about education. So even being here, I had no clue the level of racism, how it was. I grew up in Africa. I had no idea. I did not grow up, even if it was there, but it wasn't obvious for me to really feel it. So it's important to have that kind of education, like not knowing the Black struggle in America, in the Caribbean, even here in the UK. That was a very shocking thing for me to learn, to know, like, how come we never learn about these things? I don't know. Each person have their own personal experiences, but for me personally, it was shocking. It was really no understanding, but by observing things and listening to people, learning from others as well, and also from university. So that's when I started to think it is important. It doesn't, I'm not gonna call myself an expert that I'm gonna come with all the solutions and how to tackle this, but we are all doing our best so that we can send a clear message there that, like you say, enough is enough. Like, there are amazing people out there. We have a massive need of representation here in Scotland in every institutions. I may say in schools, in politics, in everywhere. So I may say I'm just starting. It's like a baby step for me. I'm gonna have to learn from a lot of people as well. So that's all I can say for now. So I'm very pleased and happy that it's happening. So if I can represent and do my best to do the right thing, it's no guarantee that it may happen, but we have to stay positive and to get as much effort as possible so that we can move this country forward and try to tackle these issues.
Excellent, good contribution there, Nadia. I think you're here to learn just like myself. I think I'll now go around again while we're still struggling to see if Sir Jeff is going to join us. I'll come to you, Abby. You talked about education there. You're on mute, by the way. You talked about education there earlier on. Can you perhaps share with the panel what sort of educational strategy you think we can use to reduce or perhaps mitigate or even eliminate the consequences of racism?
There will be two main strategies. The first one will be to get a proportionate amount of teachers of colour into Scottish schools at each level, nursery school, primary school, secondary school, that reflects the actual population of colour of Scotland. So, because right now it's very underrepresentative, the number of Black teachers in Scottish schools in relation to the Black population. So that needs to be there, and that will not only help students of colour to understand that they can feel safe within the classroom to a certain extent and within the school environment, but also it will help the wider population, white students and teachers and parents understand that a Black authority figure can and should be respected. Yes, because that then permeates throughout society. That certainly permeates throughout the life of the white child, who will always hopefully carry that respect with them for the rest of their lives and pass it down. So that's certainly one way that we need to change things within the Scottish education system. The second way is the curriculum itself, which also is not reflective of Black people's achievements in any subject. So not just in, for example, literature, English literature, where so many Black Scottish students say they don't feel represented in the books that they're reading in class, but also just in other areas. In science, for example, there's so many instrumental Black scientists. It was a Black person who invented the traffic lights. It was a Black person who invented, everyone knows about Thomas Edison, invented the light bulb. No one knows about the Black man who invented the filament to make that light bulb actually function, yes? For people to know about these prominent, intelligent Black people in the world that's helped move the entire global population forward, that will help, I feel, to also make an impact when it comes to respecting Black people in general, because people know about Black achievement. So changing the makeup of the teaching body to reflect Scotland's diversity, as well as changing the makeup of the curriculum, again, to reflect Scotland's diversity and to perpetuate the many brilliant Black people who exist. That would be two of the ways to take education forward in Scotland.
Excellent there. So the good suggestion there. To that question, Amanda, what do you think could be? I know you blog about a lot about different issues affecting Black people in different parts of the UK, and and even you touch into current affairs and politics. And you as well is a former politician. So what do you make of those suggestions? Is that the way forward?
It absolutely is. It absolutely 100% is. And then treble that, quadruple that, because the older members on the panel, I ain't pointing to anybody particular, Councillor Graham, Mr. McCarthy, you will remember, as I do, that when, back in the 60s and 70s, if a Black person came on the television, and many people will say this, your parents would call you in to the room, whatever it was about, come, there is a Black person on the television. Now, we have to say, obviously, that has changed. We do now see Black people on the television, but they are still very much in particular pigeonholes, sport, maybe some comedy, dancing. When it comes to all the other areas, and the one that Abby has just mentioned, which is the most important, I think, education, we are not seeing that. And a few weeks ago, when I wrote my open letter, this was during the Black Lives Movement, which has been mentioned, is obviously going to be mentioned. And one of the things I was talking about there was, the demonstrations have fired up a whole new generation of people, but we really need to be dealing with what next. And that's what Abby's just been talking about. And we have to get Black people out of the margins. Black History Month is fantastic. This opportunity for us all to be together debating this is great, but we cannot only ever have a slot for Black people when it's talking about being Black. We want, as Abby said, the Black educationalists, the Black teachers, just doing the mainstream stuff. I, am a Radio 4 listener. That's my generation, my slot, and it is it's a flagship station for the BBC. And from morning till night, it is white, middle class, London-based people talking about their hobbies, and everybody else is paying for it. I want to hear Black people on mainstream programs and in mainstream places just being able to do their thing, whether they are scientists, teachers, whatever. And that's what we need. And this is where the step has not been made from you know, needing to promote, needing equality, and we have to push over, and it has to be a push, because we know that people who have those positions are not going to move over. And there's been a classic example of that just very recently in Scotland. Now, I was told about this. If I get the details wrong, I apologise. But I understand that the ex-Scottish Labour leader, Kezia Dugdale, just took quite a lucrative post on a body which was established to promote diversity. I also understand there are no black people on that panel. Now, you would think in this day and age, somebody politically woke, politically savvy would go, hang on a minute, shouldn't a black person be doing this? No, she took the job. So we cannot wait for the people who have the positions and have the power and have the voice to move over. There has to be some pushing. And that actually is the question. That has always been the question. We don't want to wait until there is what's happening in America, which is moved way beyond protest. It is open civil unrest. You know, we don't want that. But at the same time, I would hate to think that, you know, the two younger people here on this panel today, when they get to my age, are still having this conversation. That's no good.
No. Absolutely. I think we will come back now. Let's try to see if we have Professor Sir Jeff Palmer on the panel. Prof, you managed to connect? Oh, just disappeared at the nick of time there.
He's got gremlins.
Right. Okay, that's fine. Graham, I think it's about time to come to you, because you are active in politics now, and you also in you're a member of, obviously, you're a councillor of the party that is in government in Scotland, and you also head the SNP National Executive on Equality. I think it's a BMAE or BAME candidates or members. What's the plan? What's the strategy? Yeah, okay. So what's the strategy there?
It's pretty straightforward. Our network is obviously there to try and get more activism within the party, but it's also there to make sure we're in leading campaigning roles. Last year, we saw more BAME people speak at conference than has ever spoken before. A good dozen of us moved motions and resolutions, and that people haven't seen before. But as you see now, we're going through the selection bits, and I've just spent the last 8 weeks really, being involved in the process of the NEC deciding its candidates and the processes and stuff. And that's been quite difficult, I have to say, because obviously the NEC is up there to be shot at, and there's quite a lot of disquiet at people. Basically, us taking the equalities measures that we wanted to do. We voted last year to take a number of equalities measures to make sure we didn't present an all-white list of candidates, and that we had a gender-balanced list of candidates. We put measures in place for that. And now that we're acting on it, we're getting a bit of some of the fight back from that. But the results of the last few weeks have been very encouraging. In fact, lots of Black, Asian and minority ethnic people have put themselves forward for seats right across Scotland. There's a good dozen or more of them. And I added myself to that today. I made myself into Edinburgh West. I wanted to make sure everybody else was sorted first. And then I made my decision about where I was going to go. But I'm very determined that we will get some SNP BAME MSPs elected in this parliament. This parliament will look very different, and it's really a demand that lots of people have made of me. I mean, really is. I didn't start thinking I was going to do this electoral politics thing. I'm a community activist, really. That's where I come from. I'm also a culture producer. Those are the things I want to do in my life. But life has decided something different for me, so I'm doing this, and I think I've got a responsibility as an African Caribbean person in the position that I've been in, to encourage more people to come after me. And I didn't go, people would ask me why I didn't. And they would be right to ask me why I didn't, because people need to have the confidence that this is for them. This is their country. They have the right to go for these positions. And we have to encourage more people to come after me. And that's what I'm doing as I'm doing myself. So I'm that's where we're at. That we want to show the diverse Scotland that we wish to create after independence, after the election, by making sure it's represented in the Parliament. Once it's represented in the Parliament, then you have no doubt that the laws, the policies, and indeed the grant funding to bodies that supposedly for race equality, as Amanda's pointed out, it's ridiculous that that organisation got money to do this when they have no track record of working with BAME communities. That must not ever happen again. In fact, if I'm in that Parliament, I'll fight to have that grant withdrawn and given to a black-led charitable organisation with a track record of dealing with people. It's because we are not there in powers of powers to make these decisions that is part down to why these decisions are made. You can have decisions, you will get decisions.
Okay, Graham. I think we're not going to tolerate that. Okay, thank you, Councillor Graham Campbell. I was just finishing there and saying that. Okay, we lost you completely there. But I'll come to you, Mokami Macron, MB. You, as a obviously a retired civil servant in Scotland, what's your experience on this, and what do you suggest that we can do apart from education? Obviously, politics has a big part to play. What do you think can be done to perhaps eliminate the consequences of racism in the systems, one of the systems, which is what the system that you worked in before? Can you share perhaps your experience and also, what you see for the way forward? Because you insinuated at the beginning there, that preparing the future for your children, your grandchildren, and the new Scotland. What would you suggest?
First of all, let me give there's a feedback. There's an echo. I don't know whether it's mine or no. I would like to give Abe a big hug on the screen, because you talked about education, and Amanda, and also Nadia. But the way you talked about it is really encouraging. I was a bit nervous that you're going to embark onto suggesting we should do more anti-racist training, all that stuff, because I do recall when we invited Doreen Lawrence to speak at a conference in Edinburgh, in Falkirk, when I was the CEO there. He said all the training the Met had received did not save her son. And I opened and asked people, are we going to wait until 6 million in Scotland, 5 million people are trained before we get equality? Because after when BLM came about, people started sharpening their pencils and polishing their slides to start anti-racist training. And I would really be concerned about that. The training, the education you're talking about is spot on, because that is what we need to change. Amanda and those older people may remember Paulo Freire when he talked about conscientization of the masses. And we do need to have a situation where our people are educated about politics. And I'm not talking about party politics. I don't do party politics, because I think that's a different genre altogether. Politics which gives us awareness of how the systems work, how policies are made, how decisions are made, our right to vote, how we can change the way things are now. Because what has been the biggest problem is we are not, because of a need to survive, we do all sorts of low-end jobs, and we don't have time, we are tired. Our children are just joining us in that bottom heap. We don't have an opportunity to ask questions. How do we go up the ladder rather than just constantly surviving on the low level? So I would like that kind of people engaged in politics, or different kind of politics. And people tend to say, oh, you're too political, we don't want to do anything to do with that. But I see that as a tool for change, a tool for us to be able to make our policymakers accountable, because that is the biggest problem we have. If the First Minister can have two advisory groups, one on human rights and another one on women, and I think Amanda touched on another group, and we don't have a single African on the group, And when you ask a question about that, you become public enemy number one. then we have a really serious crisis in our hands. Because I said in a demonstration a long time ago, I can't understand how we're so visible because of the way we look, and the police can see us miles away when they think we are driving or committing a crime. But when we need help, we are so invisible and so unreachable. Those kind of for the civils, for the government to say, "Oh, we didn't know who to ask," but they are able to ask people from other ethnic communities. So to me, that is lack of accountability. And that lack of accountability is also because we do not have a strong constituency of ourselves. If I raise an issue, I can tell you immediately somebody will tell me, "Oh, but so-and-so is so happy. They're not complaining. It's just you." So we do need to kind of change that kind of our own narrative about that. And that's where community development comes in. It's not the old type of community development. It's where we're looking at, in the past, we used to say, yeah, we want role models. But role models, and when you are one, and I really worry about, people used to say I was the first CEO to work for a race equality country. And I was, African woman CEO, the first one. But the problem is, when you are the first there alone, the weight of the system is against you, and your people are expecting so much from you. So you achieve very little, and in the process you burn out because you're being pulled from all sides. So we need to focus not being the first to do something, but all of us being able to create a critical mass so things can change. Because one person alone, and if you're in party politics, for example, you have to follow your party line. It does not necessarily have to be, some rebels may oppose that, but then you don't go high up you never become a cabinet secretary if you're rebelling against your party line. So it is those kind of things for me that matter when we look at why is it that the policies that were put before did not work, and why is it everybody comes into the system and says, "Oh, we need a new race equality strategy." We do not need anymore. We just to activate and actually implement the ones that exist.
Yeah.
And for the young people coming in, I was Nadia. I was in your position when I came in, and I made many mistakes, and I made many compromises. I now age and years of experience make me not compromise. So you do need support, and I really would like this intergenerational dialogue working, because we're losing a lot of knowledge and experience from older people, because there is no communication between younger people and older people. And there seems to be, there is also not between younger and older people. There's a huge competition to be recognized. Sometimes I feel we are like, when I was young, we used to feed chicken in a yard, and when you come with a handful of corn, maize, they all run and scatter, and when you throw them, they start pecking on each other. We need to stop this. Everybody is trying to vie for position, to be recognized. People seem to think being taken in a photograph with the first minister is equality. It's not. That's just a token. It means she's available to us and she's accessible, full stop. But it doesn't mean that the civil servants in the office down the road are going to change policy. So we need to be really more savvy than just, and I don't like saying we need to be united, because we come from a continent, many people. And I also know other communities are not united the way we are expected to be united, but we need to be clever about working together. That is what I would like to see, rather than saying we can't achieve anything until there's unity. That is not true.
Thank you, Mokami. I'm conscious of the time, and I know that we spend a little bit of time trying to sort out the technical challenge that we're facing at the beginning of the program. I'll move on now to perhaps you should have a take on, Nadia, you've had, experience perhaps people share their lived stories, and also you have an open door there for a more experienced hand to come in. What's your assessment of the conversation so far? Because I know you mentioned you've just come to learn, but I'm just wanting to check that you're getting the knowledge that you came here for.
Yeah. First of all, I need to acknowledge something. When I was talking about educating about the history of slavery or colonization, I'm not talking about the entire 6 million people, 5 million. It was more between Black community themselves, because I can tell that many people are not aware of a lot of things. So because of that, there is a lack of understanding where to go forward to, how to know your rights, what to do. You cannot just sit thinking like this is normal. This is a normal way because I'm from this community. Therefore, there is a barrier there. I can never become this. I can never do that. So I want to say thank you to everybody who's been doing amazing job before us. We are learning from you. So yes, like you say, I'm definitely going to make as many mistakes as possible. It's not easy to feel that you are the first this. No one in nowadays enjoy saying that I'm the first this. There is no competition here. It's like if I had the opportunity to do that and be the stepping stone or being encouraging other people to do the same thing, it would be amazing. That was the purpose of this. I'm not going there thinking that I have all the solutions, but I'm gonna need as much support as possible as well, and then hoping that others will follow the same as we're all following others, but to do the right thing, not for the titles, not for wanting to be something special than others. We have passed all of that from everything we've seen in the world. So this is to send a clear message, especially for young people. I'm not that young, even if I look that, but it's like to really, really inspire others to not being scared. Like coming from my background, no one would have believed that I would have the gut or the to come up to put my fear on the side. And this is not an easy thing to do. It's a sacrifice. And we need to acknowledge that it's not an easy decision. You make that decision because you want to see the change. I'm a mother as well. I want my child to grow up knowing that there is no limit. It's going to be hard. It's going to take years, but somebody have to do it. So
somebody
that's
have to
all
do
I
it.
can say.
It's a sacrifice. I think that's a key word there that I got. Nadia, you on your columns with Glasgow Times, I've managed to come through quite a few of your articles, and I always go to the comment section, and you have experienced something, girl. You tell me, why do you take those feedback, those kind of racist, negative feedback that you get on your column? How do you tackle that? How do you handle that?
Like I say, I prepared myself for that because I knew it's gonna come to that. I tend not to read all the negative comment because it's scary. I'm not gonna lie. It's not easy. Nobody wants to see people saying negative things about you, knowing that I'm new in all of this. I'm not used to that, but you just have to move forward and do your best and protect yourself as much as you can. But what needs to be done. I have this platform and I'm going to use it in the best way that I can with all the support that I have around me. But that's all I can say. It's really hard, but like I say, it's a risk that I took, and I'm gonna take a full responsibility for that until, yes, I have more people to support that idea.
Thank you, Nadia. Taking responsibility and the sacrifice, quite some very powerful word there. Graham Campbell, I'll come to you. There is, I saw the tweet of First Minister Nicola Sturgeon yesterday, and I also saw a tweet that you also commented on this morning when I was researching for this program. And it's about racism, isn't it? You follow up on the Hamza, the Justice Secretary, a tweet about phone calls that he's been receiving for people that candidates of BMAE or BIM, candidate whom have put forward themselves for elections, and they are basically being abused.
There's always been a very strong right-wing minority. I call them technical right-wingers online, or trolls, and they have been very present ever since the beginning of social media. What's, I suppose, new about the last, 4 or 5 years since the Trump election point is that they're much more organized and focused in on attacking Black public figures. You've seen that with Diane Abbott down in England, and obviously Hamza and Anna Sarwar for Labour have both been massively subjected to this direct racism online. You see it in the comments pages of newspapers. I think that newspapers are simply not good enough, and media organizations are not good enough at filtering the racist comments from these things. So, to be honest, when I have articles published about me, I don't read the comments section because I don't want to waste my emotional energy or time absorbing all the negative stuff that they're obviously intending to attack me with. Putting myself out there as a candidate for an MSP is going to obviously attract more. So I've gone into that fully conscious of it, but I can't pretend it hasn't been a factor in maybe putting me off doing something. I was 50-50 about it until last month or so. I would have probably not done so, partly down to that, but partly down to other reasons. But in the end, we are always going to get this because of the form of the technology. The question is, what happens to the people that do it? And I think it should be a criminal offence to say online what you would be a criminal offence if you said it in person. I think you shouldn't be allowed to have an anonymous Twitter or social media identity. You should have your name. You should stand by the comments you make against Black people if you're going to make them. Most of them are cowards. Most of them are anonymous. Some of them are robot-controlled entities. Some of them are controlled by states. Who knows who they're controlled by? But there's clearly an agenda out there which is very organized and very targeted to spread racism. And I think anti-racists need to be as savvy technologically in challenging and attacking those people. I suppose hardcore racists we're never going to change, but it's the people who might retweet what a hardcore racist says without realizing that it's hardcore fascists who are doing those messages. We have to be much more savvy about interfering online, not cede the space to them. Obviously hard-died rule racists, we can't do much about them, but there are people we can tackle and argue with, and I make that case to my white anti-racist friends. Don't break links with people who are friends of yours who are racist. Tackle them on the race question, because yes, it will be tiring, it will be exhausting to go through those arguments, but trust me, it's way more exhausting for us to have to do that. So we choose to do that. So it's something we're going to face for a while until there are laws against it.
Until there are laws against it. Amanda, you prescribe to the idea that it should be criminal to perhaps, be racist, whether on social media or on any platform.
Right. I'm glad you asked me that because, as you know, back in the day, I used to have what my mum calls a proper job. I practiced as a lawyer. And one of the things that very much distressed me last week was hearing about the Black barrister in London who 3 times in one day was assumed to be a defendant as opposed to a barrister. And it appears to be that was purely because she was young and Black. I think it's important, it's incredibly important to remember that a lot of this stuff is illegal. It is illegal. To threaten somebody, to make somebody feel threatened, that in using racist language is against the law, and it should not matter. I think this is the point you're getting at. It shouldn't matter whether it's online or in the street. back in the day, and I don't want to make myself sound like 100 here, obviously, you know, we didn't have mobile phones, never mind social media. And I am not on any social media platforms. I have never felt attracted to do that. My hate mail used to literally come through the mail, you know, in an envelope with a stamp on it. And that in itself was also scary because that was coming to my home address. And I very much felt the intimidation there was people, you know, kind of making it known to me that they knew where I and my then very young family lived. But I would like to just pick up on two things very quickly in tackling that, because I don't want this to be negative. It doesn't have to be. And the question, the statement just previously about, you know, the anti-racist training. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It is not our job to tell other people how not to be racist. Being racist is the racist's problem. And we have to be off that hook. We have to be able to get on, you know, with our lives and do the things we want to do, you know, the newspaper columnist, whatever, you know. And actually, this takes us full circle back to Abby's point, which is that we need to be seeing Black people proportionately in positions that affect people, that affect people's level of respect. And this was in the letter I mentioned, the open letter that I wrote, which actually, George, is how we made our connection, isn't it?
That's right.
I sent this open letter during the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, and it was about, you know, where do we go from here? And, you know, if you, I don't know, have a bank, you go to the bank, you never ever see a Black employee, you never ever see that up in their organization. Same if you know, need to use a lawyer. Not me, I don't practice anymore, but, you know, and you go to a law firm and there's nobody above the level of cleaner in that firm, go to another law firm. If you are Black and you are looking, you know, to send your child to a school, yes, ask Abby's question. Start asking that question. How many Black staff do you have? And then when we get to the point where, you know, as Nadia was saying, it's not about being the first Black person. I can't believe we're still having this. It's not about being, because if you are the first or the one and the only, it is very easy for the racists to pick you off. But, you know, if there's lots of you and it just becomes the norm, you know, what are they going to do? They're going to be very busy. You know, they might give up. I don't know. But let's not worry about them. Let's worry about allowing Black people to do what they want to do, that they don't only ever get to be on the mainstream media to talk about a riot. You know, let's have the Black scientists on, the Black teachers, etc., etc. You know, I feel like we're all singing from the same hymn sheet here, and we just need that out there in society.
Absolutely. The vast arrays of knowledge, experience, and education, I think, and which is the whole purpose. I'm conscious of the fact that we're just coming up to the 1 hour the mark, and I know in the briefing I said we'll go for an hour and a half, so we still got about half an hour to go. I'm going to move on to the next question now, because we've really touched broadly on the first question, the subject of this conversation. So is racism bigger than just police actions on the street? Graham Campbell.
Well, obviously, yes, but it's more that although we don't have the same problem with, you know, deaths in police custody, we do have the same same sorts of problems with police harassment and the way police react when dealing with them. So often we will call the police when an incident happens to us, and then we get treated as if we're the perpetrators instead of the victims. So that is a regular occurrence. Everybody I know who has a car has been stopped. I don't have a car, so I'm lucky not to have had that experience. But trust me, anybody I know who's got a fancy-ish car has been stopped by the police way more than they should have done. Anybody who's been to an airport or a train station and come across the British Transport Police has suffered in that way. So there's no doubt we have a problem with racist policing, and that policing is institutionally racist. Getting that back to getting public life, and indeed the party I'm in, to accept that our institutions are institutionally racist is the first step. If they understand that, then they will change it. I would say, it's a multifaceted problem. Right? Which obviously the institutions are problematic, but our interaction with public life in general is a problem. Our public interaction with the economy is in general. We face racialized discrimination in the private sector of the economy because we can't get loans to start businesses. We can't get access to things and networks of power and influence that help you in business, get you along. We're not in the same circles. So you're discriminated against in terms of your qualifications. 2/3 of our community is degree level educated, but they are underemployed, not employed in the professions they've trained for, despite many of them training for those professions right here in Scotland, but they're working in nightclubs, security guarding, that sort of thing, or in care work. Nothing wrong with those professions, but when you're qualified to be civil engineers and medical professionals, and you're not doing the thing you've trained for, something's going on, something's happening. It's discrimination in the public sector labour market. That's really important in Scotland because a large number of the jobs that are here are in that sector. So unless we do something actively about the discriminations there, the public bodies have to make the leadership on this. They have to. We have to change the equalities laws in independent Scotland to make sure that we make positive action and quotas legal. I think it will take that. I think we're going to have to change it.
Okay, Councillor Graham. I think I'll link this question to you, Abby. You basically run the Scottish Racism Project. I suppose some of the suggestions and ideas, things that interlink with your activism. Is racism bigger than just police actions on the streets?
To echo Graham, yes, it very much is. Otherwise, I wouldn't have so much material to write about. My very first article was on Scottish racism in education. The next one was supposed to be in sports, but there was so much in football specifically that filled the entire article. After that, there was racism in medicine. Policing, yes. The legal system, yes. The latest one I wrote was Scottish racism in the arts, in the performing arts, visual arts, written arts, everything. It permeates throughout society. And time again, the same issues come up. People are either openly racist and xenophobic and basically have bad will to people of other ethnicities, or they're simply ignorant and have no idea about people of color. Perhaps they'll want to know more, however, they just don't know how to engage. So they're disrespectful by default. Again, an issue of education.
Yeah, everything
comes back to education. And each of those different facets of society have their own, their own solutions. They need to be taken individually. There's not a one size fits all, as it were, to apply to how the police are racist to people on the street, as Graham said, to how the police are racist in the courts, like Amanda said, in politics. Nadia's experienced that. All of them needs to be taken in the kind of nuanced forum that they are in, and to be looked at in detail. And so we can also apply a nuanced solution for each of them. But we need to recognize that first. Definitely. It's one of the reasons why anti-racism education or training in itself probably doesn't work, because it's done in such a universal way. And we're saying we're going into different companies, different organizations, and saying, okay, so this is what you need to know about race, about racism, and then, just stop doing that. No, you need to look at it specifically and how it manifests in each one, and then also propose specific
solutions. I think we should go deeply into that solution aspect, since we've still got about 25 minutes to go. Okami Macron, I'll come to you. You have in your opening comments there, you talked about the indiscriminate death of Black people in police custody. You mentioned a few years ago. What do you think? Is racism bigger than just the police action on this this question? What do you say?
From what I have experienced and what I have read, yes. At the moment, I think we can't not notice the fact that Boris and Trump have made racism almost fashionable among the people like him, where they can get away with all sorts of comments and still get away, no recourse or anything that happens to them. But when you say bigger, we used to look at housing issues, and the fact that Black people and minority people had the worst type of housing, not just allocation of council houses, but also the fact of the resources they had to get out of ghetto type of existence. You look at the social services, social work, and adoption of Black children, African children. I don't know the statistic now. When I was working, they still was the last to be adopted. They were at the bottom. They would sometimes, some of them would grow up in care, looked after throughout their life. And that you can actually look at every of the institutions and the system we have, and you'll find the same kind of data. You look at poverty, and this is something that really bothers me because of how statistics are presented. When we talk about BME research, and then the statistics are not contradictory. What you find is that when the policymakers start looking at statistics to allocate resources, they say there are no Africans, because at the BAME or every other ethnic group has been named except Africans. And I know that for a fact, because one of the reports said there were no Africans in Scotland. There were few students, and others were Transient. So that kind of thing means that the bigger picture of exclusion. And I think the worst of all is that is the nastiness of racism. Amanda talked about having more people in different workplaces, and that is good. But have you noticed how in the immigration department, when you come through the airport, most of the people there who are checking you are minority ethnic? I can begin to wonder why. What message? What is the subliminal message we are all being given? That the gatekeepers are people who look like us, who keeping us out. So when I would also like us to look at resource allocation, funding to like African women groups is almost zero. Imagine a project dealing with female genital mutilation. Most of the cases are in Africa, but the funding is given to a white or Asian organization, not to the African women group. The African women group is given something like £20,000, which is less than you'd pay admin officers in some departments. And they run a project for the whole year, and the university is given something like £60,000 or £80,000 to do research on African women. What kind of message is that? And I think this is to cut a long story short, is when I said about accountability and how we need to make people respond is, again, and I don't want us to keep referring to history, When we stop naming racism, there was a time you could name all different isms, but then it became very uncomfortable, and it was amazing how quickly people moved on to equal opportunities and now to diversity. And in that, we used to get case workers who could actually prosecute perpetrators of racism, whether it's employers. If you didn't get a job, you could go and get representation. I don't know about other parts of the country, but in my area, I don't know anybody who does casework unless you go to a lawyer who will pay more. Those who are funded positions, all that funding was taken away. And then one can, I don't like conspiracy theory, but, and perhaps people are not even, they call it unconscious bias now, but one cannot just but wonder why all those actions were taken while we were beginning to get results. When we are able to take employers to the tribunal for discriminating on race grounds, now, and you don't even have legal aid for those kind of cases. So there is a whole lot we need to unpack. But the final point I think I would like to make is that I said we need to look at how other communities have managed to reduce, not to eliminate, reduce the the impact of racism. Because we're not going to change the mindset overnight. We really need to get our systems, our own institutions, our businesses, our hospitals, nursing homes, all those kind of things. No, and I'm not saying we get them today. We need to do like what the Jewish community did. They looked after their community, they built system for themselves, and now they can discuss from a position of power with the system when there is discrimination. We still are negotiating from a position of weakness, of begging, of persuading, of asking. And I said recently, I'm not going to prove that I'm a human being to anybody anymore. If you stand on my toe, don't expect me to come and say politely, please remove your foot off my toe. Because this is what we have been told. We are too aggressive, we are making a lot of noise, and we should quietly challenge the system. No, it's painful. People die. Mothers lose their children and parents lose their children. We cannot leave this to my granddaughter and other people. We have to now change the way we've been doing things ourselves, not waiting for the system to do it for us.
I think I would also want to bring in Nadia on our own contribution on this particular question. Then we can wrap. We can look at the last questions, the last couple of questions which I have there, and perhaps touch on some of the pointers that everyone has raised in this conversation, which is we need to discuss about proper solutions. I think. Overall, everyone is touched on some of the things that need to be done: training, education, being part of being on the table. And Nadia and Graham are on that scale, trying to get in there and be part of the conversation, and and decision and making laws that are also balanced to some extent. Can I just tap into your own understanding of the topic? On the question, Nadia, is racism for you bigger than police actions on the streets?
I would say racism is obviously bigger than, because don't know much about the police issues. Like Graham say, I don't drive myself. I haven't been arrested or had any issues with the police at all, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. We've heard stories or incidents that happen and where people are not treated fairly by the police. So I believe that racism is there, whether it's obvious or not. It's not unconscious, but it is obvious. It's there. The way they deal with people of color definitely is not going to be the same with other members. So it's difficult for me to pinpoint and say, give an example that it's bigger or not bigger, but the racism in all institutions here is obvious. It's very obvious. That's why we need to tackle all those issues, so that even in the police, there could be some kind of representation, so that people of color are like protected, like with anything that can happen to them, they're going to be protected by the system. I guess it's like someone says, no, it's not something that's going to happen today or tomorrow, but if it's not a bigger issue right now, but it's better to prevent it now. If we start preventing, speaking up, talking, and then making it clear that it's no longer acceptable to just sit and be quiet and being scared of speaking up on issues that may become a bigger issue for our children in the future, or everybody else that is going to be living in this country. So yeah, racism, I believe, is bigger than, in my opinion. Yeah.
That's right, Nadia, because you are involved in politics, so I'm going to ask you, was your party's, kind of a political, policies on equality?
Yes, absolutely. That's what drove me into it. Like, I didn't know much about the Green Party years ago. So at first, people think they're just focusing on the environment and the climate change and everything, but they are working very hard on changing the policies on equality and things like implementing policies that can work for supporting like BAME members as well. So we are currently writing something like a motion to propose that, like, there is a need of representation in all political parties, not just the Greens or SNP has. All of them should be having those kind of representation in their parties, so that we can move forward. So yes, the Green are working hard on changing some of their policies and how to be more inclusive and to bring more diversity in it. So that's what we are all working hard on. So
more inclusive policies, the Green Party there. So I'll come to you, Abby. You in terms of your suggestions that you've come up with and what you're focusing on, a lot of people that I speak to, I think a lot of people that have had them on have specific questions on the terminology that's used to describe Black, or the acronyms that are used to describe ethnic minority, Black people, and all of that. What do you make of the BAME term, or BME? There's a lot of, I don't know, I want to have your own thought on that. What do you make of that acronym?
I think the acronym of BAME is better than the previous title we had, which was Black, or politically Black to cover everyone. I say this because at university, many moons ago, I was the what they would call the Black student officer. But what they really meant was the ethnic minority officer, who would represent not just Black people who we understand originate from the African continent, but also Asian people and Native American people and people from Oceania, as well as people from other European countries who would not, they would not classify themselves as Black. So the title that was being used before was not representative of the group that that needed to be represented. So BAME, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic, it's not perfect, but I do feel it's a step in the right direction to at least encompass more of the people who do need to be represented when it comes to issues of not just racism, but also xenophobia. I'm thinking specifically of I recently wrote an article about racism in prisons in Scotland, and how quite a few of the prisoners who experienced racism were Polish. And so the law that that they invoked when they were attacked in prison, and, you know, recognizing that the prison officers who were warned that they would be attacked did nothing about it. That was race relations laws, as it were. And they weren't protected from that type of hate crime. So they would not consider themselves Black. And for that reason, I do think it's correct to have a term that more properly encompasses all ethnic minorities from all ethnicities within the United Kingdom, living in the United Kingdom, and therefore can be discriminated against inside the United Kingdom. So I wouldn't say BAME is perfect, but it is better than the term that was used before.
And I think I will bring in, Amanda there, because the reason I'm bringing in Amanda, don't be scared, that's fine. I'm not going to ask you any questions of this out of your reach. But you illustrated earlier, you talked about the former Labour leader, Kezia Doctor, taking up their position at I think it's the John Smith Center as the director. Yes, and I think there's been just to kind of be balanced, you know, she's been pushing since he took over. She's been pushing for a balance of representation within the institution. So that is actually there. So I thought I'll bring that in just so that because you brought that in. So I thought let's just add a bit more details there. I've been doing my research. Yeah. So but thank you for bringing that in. But I will ask you. I think I will just go to the last question. Graham, I would like to kind of tap into. I know there are a lot of campaigns that you've been doing. Are you basically you just wanted to stay a community person? Is now your politics driven by the fact that you've tried so much on the grassroots to try and get things working, but it's so difficult. So you want to go up there and see how you can help the grassroots. Is that your motive to get it to stand for Parliament?
I suppose that is one of my motivations, but also I support independence, and quite obviously independence is going to be delivered if we have a Parliament that reflects those views. And I also happen to think that the future of the country, the circumstances in which Black people will live in it, will be determined by how we achieve our independence. And if we are not in that mix, in that discussion, and in that movement as it happens, then it will be developed, and the project will be pointed in a direction that is without us. I wear a badge every day which says, "Nothing about us without us is for us." And that's the sort of motto of the SNP BAME, which is basically we want to be included, and we have a duty to include ourselves in the struggle to create the kind of country we want. So that's probably also an equally important motivation for me, that I want Black people to be present in deciding what the future Scotland will look like. But make no mistake, if we're not there contesting the potentially institutionally racist decisions that white people make when we're not in the room, then we can't be surprised that the impact is the way it is. It needs a Black perspective. I can say that from the experience I've had as a councillor. The very fact that I've been in the room to contest some of those decisions has changed the decision. Just being there has made a difference. I wish there were more, but let's make sure there's more. There's not just one. And also, let's be real, that even with Black and Asian people in the Parliament, that won't mean that the next day we don't have institutionalized racism. Remember, we had President Obama was president for 8 years, and lots and lots of Black people got killed by the police in America. In fact, more of them got killed under his watch than under the previous president, because American policing is not accountable in the way that at least it is to an extent in Scotland. It needs to be made more so. The Sheku Bio case shows us that it needs to be made more so. That will be a big watershed moment politically for us. So I'm very, very aware that race and the identity of Scotland and equality policy is going to be an ongoing theme in the run-up to the election, and also in the period after, as we move to a referendum.
Yeah, I think we're just moving. Thank you, Graham. I think we're just moving to the concluding it's part of our discussion. But I would like Amanda, you blog on Brown Girl Outside the Ring. Can you tell us a little bit about your blog in just a minute?
Okay, it'll be very quick. Brown Girl Outside the Ring. This is a blog that has been going since about 2012, and bearing in mind what I was saying before, echoing other comments that it can't just be our job all the time to be telling other people how not to be racist. We have to be able to do our own thing. This is a comment blog that ranges on everything from the dangers of not looking after the natural environment to everyday politics. I cover social issues, everything. I write about the things that affect me, not just as a Black person, but as a human being, a mother, a grandmother, and just somebody who cares about the world. I'm not, as I said, on any social media, so this is me, talking to the world once a week on a Tuesday, if you're interested.
Once a week on a Tuesday. And Abby, your blog on Scottish racism. Can you tell? I mentioned that in the introduction there. Tell us a bit more about your activism on that platform.
Sure. So the articles on the blog are split into two categories. One of the categories are the deep dive articles, which looks into specific facets of racism in Scottish society, and I listed them off previously. So there's articles on Scottish racism in football, as well as the legal system, as well as the arts. The upcoming one is on Scottish racism in history. Those are deep dive articles that are very deeply researched and then presented in a more kind of digestible way. And then there's also articles that are real life articles, which look into what happens with individuals basically across Scotland who have a BAME background, that have experienced racism, had tried to go to the Scottish press about their experiences, and the Scottish press have not been interested, and the reason for that usually is because it's a white institution like a university, or like one of them is a mental health hospital facility, which is similar to the white institution that is the Scottish media. And they don't like to tell each other, basically, even though the stories that I've heard, that I've interviewed people on, are quite heinous. Hence, I write about those experiences for people, and I put it out there, I share it. So other BAME people who are probably going through the same thing understand they're not alone in any way, shape, or form, and they should not be dismissed, and they should be heard. So those are the two categories of articles that I have on my website, and they come out monthly, every month.
Every month you have your say on their platform, Scottish Racism, which is a blog that could be checked out on Brown Girl Outside the Ring. So we just got 2 minutes. So in this 2 minutes, I'm going to ask this. There's been research, I think Graham will really talk a bit more about this in another time, but there's been research of support that is growing for a radical independent Scotland as anti-racist. Do you think that's a possibility? Mokami Macron?
Yes, as it happens, and I'm not speaking for that forum, I'm a member of the Scottish Independence Forum Committee, which is a cross-party. It's not a party for this. It is many people from all walks of life. And I think there is a possibility now that we can get independence, because I think people have woken up to the reality of sort of other government. But I think much more than that is the whole question of racism is something that has made people like me from the beginning want to know much more about what independent Scotland will look like. Because the party that takes the country to independence may not necessarily be the party of 10, 20 years on. And it really depends on what we benchmark now as the values, the culture we want to create. And I did say recently that when you have overtly racist immigration discourse going on in a country, and everybody saying, oh, Scotland is too small, we can't have all these people coming in, refugees and all that. It's not about saying, oh, open the doors to everybody. It's about the tone and the content of the discussion. At the moment, it tends to be polarized, where you have extreme views of people saying, we don't want them there. But then I don't wear a badge. If you meet me in the streets, you want to know whether I'm a refugee, whether I'm a citizen, whether I'm a visitor, and we need to be very careful about the signals we give to other people, to the public.
Thank you, Mokami Macron. And I'll come to you, Amanda Baker. You know, what do you make of this subject? An independent Scotland will be anti-racist?
Oh, wow. George, that's a huge question to chuck in at the end. I mean, we would hope that it would be. I think let's flip that on its head and let's deal with what we do know, which is we currently have a racist Prime Minister at Westminster, and we have a foreign policy which is described just a couple of weeks ago as being based on assumption, anecdote and prejudice. This is in 2020. So for now, shall we just be content with saying, let's try and rid ourselves of Westminster and their racism and mismanagement and austerity and all the horrors that we've had since Thatcherism onwards. This is why, George, I'm saying this is a big question to chuck in at the end. This is a whole other programme. We can't see the future, but we know what we've been dealing with for the last few decades. And I think actually the question about whether Black people should be voting for independence in Scotland is a hugely interesting one. I actually think the answer is self-evident. Okay, that is self-evident. The answer is self-evident. Nadia, you have another political view, the Green Party, independence of Scotland and anti-racist Scotland.
Yeah, we definitely support the independence. So I totally agree with that. I've been voting for yes even before I joined the Green Party. So yes, I think it's something that we all support and believe that if that happened, we could have a new government, a new country, that we can have all this new reform and then changing everything we need to change, which can also tackle all these kind of racism issues that we have. So let's hope that happens. That's a big hope for some of us. Yeah. So yeah, that's all I can say. We are hoping very much that that could happen so that we can all work and to move the country forward for the best, I hope. Yeah.
Yeah. And Abby, I think you have something to contribute on that question as well.
On Scottish independence?
Support is growing for a radical independent Scotland that will be anti-racist.
If Scotland did become independent, it would definitely have to put anti-racism at the top of its agenda, because it's now representing itself to the entire world and now must interact with the entire world one-on-one. And the entire world is basically other ethnic minorities. Well, not other ethnic minorities, but other ethnicities. And it needs to do that in an effective way. And if it's institutionally racist, that's going to backfire. And it's going to therefore make them perhaps negotiate trade deals or whatever with, well, either conscious or unconscious racist views, which will damage them. It really will. So if they do plan to be independent successfully, then yes, they very much need to put anti-racism at the top of their agenda so they themselves can be successful.
Okay, I think I'm going to be very fair that I think on this question, I would probably know a bit of Graham's answer to that. But I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, Graham, to conclude. Do you think the Black Lives Matter movement has made it, the current political atmosphere has made it very difficult for Scotland not to gain independence?
I'm not sure if I understood that question. There's too many double negatives in that. Do you mean?
Do you think the Black Lives Matter has contributed more difficult the current political atmosphere and the Black Lives Matter movement has contributed for Scotland to make a case to be independent?
Okay, right. I think Abby and Nadia and also Mukambi and Amanda are all correct in the way that Scotland, needs to come in the next period. And particularly what Abby said about how we relate to the world, what global Scotland is. If we want to be global Scotland, then we've got to be a country that sees itself as equal to African, Asian, and Caribbean countries, many of which we've exploited and become wealthy out of. So we need to have a reparative justice relationship with that world. To do that, we have to tackle anti-racism is one of the core strands within the radical independence movement, along with anti-nuclear, anti-imperialism, anti-war, and also anti-poverty. These are all reasons why people support independence, but anti-racism has come to the fore because of Black Lives Matter. Because of that, it's now an issue of live political discussion and debate about how the country will be different, what its constitution will be, what will its economic policy for redistribution of wealth and power be. These are relevant to Black people because these will determine the outcomes. It's no longer satisfying for us to hear platitudes about equality when in fact the outcome is different, when the outcome is inequality. There has to be, in an independent Scotland, an outcome that creates that equality. And therefore institutions have to change. So that is the challenge that the independence movement has to come up with, is how we will do that. That's partly a constitutional question, it's partly an economic policy question. Reparative justice, are we going to do that? In which case, that means compensating the countries that we've exploited and having economic relations with them which are different, which are more equal, which means we technology transfer, that we pay for their health service when they're sending us nurses for free. It's that kind of thinking we're going to have a global Scotland that's respected, will be successful if it has that attitude to the world. That's really the important role that we can play. So I hope that everybody here will take up my invitation to help us restart Africans for an Independent Scotland. We've planned to have an event on the 31st of October. We want to restart the band and also reform the band in a different way, because I think we can play a really important role in the period coming up.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham. Thank you very much, Councillor Graham Campbell. I think we'll come to the conclusion there, but let me just put this whilst everyone is here. We've invited every panel member here based on the subject that we're discussing, which was, how can we change the consequences of racism when it is rooted in system and slavery? Now, everybody here is involved in different capacity and also representing their political views and parties. So again, we're in Scotland. So if there is no Conservative member, it means we don't have any Black Conservative member of the Scottish Conservative, basically, who would have been participating on this. And there's, I don't know, any Labour, a Scottish Labour political leader, Black leader who would have been also invited to participate in this, just so that Jambo Radio don't get accused of being biased. Right, so I made it there. Am I correct, Councillor Graham Campbell? I'm aware of this.
I'm fully aware, Bobo. And just to let you know, my Tory colleague on the council, Bailey Adiaibanu, who's a Nigerian Scot, is the one Tory councillor in his group. But to his great credit, he backed my resolution at the council on last month to basically parts of Black Lives Matter related motion about museums and about slavery in streets, the Tory group supported that. So, you know, that tells you something, that there was a unanimousness across the chamber to support the measures we want to take to show that Glasgow's reckoning with that history. So, you know, I don't hold out immediate hope that somebody like Ali will come across to independence, but certainly on the question of telling the truth about our history, he's there. So, you know, we have support across the political spectrum for those measures.
Excellent. So it's good to have that mix in there, Graham. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Nadia Kayenge, Glasgow Green Party candidate for the Scottish Parliament. We wish you the very best and good luck. Obviously, we will be in contact. We'll be following up on your activities, and please do feel free to come on and stay in contact so that we can always have this conversations about your activities and for the greater community benefit. Thank you so much for coming on. Abiodun Abi, founder and blogger, Scottish Racism Project. Thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you.
I know we're going to have another conversation on specifically on your project. But thank you so much for coming on. Councillor Graham Campbell, as ever, thank you so much. Always there for us. And we are very grateful that you always give your time. So you're the first African and Caribbean councillor for Glasgow City Council. Thank you so much. Amanda Baker, thank you so much for coming on. I know previously I've written your name incorrectly, so I'm trying to be very careful. Thank you, but thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you. I've loved it. I've loved meeting everybody else.
Thank you so much. Meeting you. Excellent. So, and you can stay connected. And I think everyone can consent that if each of you panelists want to. Yeah, if any of you want to, get in touch with each other, you don't have each other's contact. I'm quite happy to facilitate that if you all consent to that. But I'll just put that in there. And Mokami Macron MB, former policy manager in the Equality Unit at the Scottish Government and Human Rights Campaigner. Thank you so much, Mokami. As very often it's so difficult to get hold of you, but once you get hold of you, you're always ready to support and to talk. I really appreciate you all for coming on today. Unfortunately, Sir Jeff has asked me through a text message to extend his apologies to each one of you for not being able to participate because he's been struggling with connection. So it was just technology. So unfortunately, we would have benefited as well from his own contribution. But he's always also there to communicate with. So thank you so much for this conversation. We'll end the recording there, but I'll just ask. We often do this at Jambo Radio. We try to know if there is anything in this sort of discussions that we've missed out that we would have tackled. Anyone thought of anything in the course of the conversation which we would have perhaps exploited a bit more?
I don't like special cases as such, but I think we really need to look at the intersection between race, class, and gender, because women, African women, get it from all sides, and I think in the context of what's going on, the mothers dealing with racism, the experience and their children and their husbands and their brothers and sisters is a bit too much.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Mokami, for that. Anyone thought of anything that they would have perhaps expected that I would have asked in this conversation, or perhaps we would have exploited a bit more?
COVID-19?
Considering that, there are 6, I think, quite opinionated people here, I think you've done incredibly well. And any of the questions you've asked, I think we would happily have taken off down an avenue and just dealt with that on its own. And you know, I don't know how the others feel, but this has been a great experience for me. And I want to thank you, George, for letting us have this opportunity. And maybe we can do it again on other topics, because this feels very positive.
I agree.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. So there will be other topics that will come in. Thank you so much. I will leave you to the rest of your day. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye, George.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, George.
On the World Wide Web, on your mobile phone, and on all social media platforms. Jambo Radio.